Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have both your sun and moon in Aquarius. Aquarius is a fixed air sign and it is ruled by Uranus as well as Saturn, which is the traditional ruler before Uranus came along. And the other thing to note is that Saturn rules Capricorn, which is a sign that is associated with tradition, authority, and is quite a bit different than the Uranian energies, which have to do with rebellion, freedom, awakening. And so if your sun and moon are close enough in degrees to form a conjunction, this will strengthen that energy as it pertains to both your ambitions as well as your inner nature, your emotions. I mean, one thing that this could really indicate is somebody who is psychic. And I'm not saying that the conjunction would necessarily make you more psychic, but I think especially if you want to do some kind of work, have a career in an area that is associated with utilizing your intuition, then that is a plus. But you also have to look at where this is taking place in your chart, because I had somebody write a comment to me on YouTube that I can't be, making these generalizations about a particular planet and sign or whatever it was that they were reacting to. And I said, well, that goes without saying, because obviously there are layers of the onion when it pertains to the natal chart. But these readings that I'm doing like this, they're meant to, first of all, they're meant to be entertaining, but they're also meant to maybe strike a note with people. Oh yeah, that's how I am. But not to say that you're like that 100%, or maybe there are circumstances where this shows up for you, but others that doesn't. Like for instance, if you have this conjunction, or if you don't have the conjunction, it's possible, like with the Placidus, the unequal house system, that you could have you could have the sun in one house and the moon in another house. So I don't want to just say, but let's just say it is in the same house and it's in the 7th house. This is going to make you much more relationship oriented and also interested in harmony and less interested in controversy. Because Aquarius, being the awakener, can tend to be quite provocative and shocking and trying to elicit a reaction out of people. And that's not necessarily something bad. Some people just write it off as, oh, that person is just trying to get attention or whatever. No, sometimes it isn't that. It's because the person really wants to jolt people into a better awareness of their, true nature, so that they, kind of like break out of conventional patterns and matrix indoctrination. And you can't do that like very subtly sometimes, sometimes it's almost like hitting somebody over the head with some kind of realization about what it is that they, their preconceived notions about life. And then they're like, oh, whoa, that is true. That is different than what I really want and what I really think that life should be about. So anyway, Aquarius is a sign that if it's not being conservative, now there are because of that rulership of Saturn. There are conservative Aquarians, and this double Aquarius sun and moon can definitely enhance that. But even within those people, you will notice that they tend to be quirky. I use the example of Family Ties, the sitcom that began in the early 80s during the Reagan era in the United States, when conservatism made a comeback after a couple of wild decades. And the center of the show was Michael J. Fox's character, who was conservative with parents who were ex-hippies. And it made for great dynamics for comedic purposes. But in real life, this can also occur. You have a family that is very bohemian, artistic, and then the double Aquarius person becomes like a born-again Christian, becomes an accountant, does something so, when I say bohemian, maybe they are creative types and artists, and they're just doing their own thing, and then they have a child who is very straight-laced and all of that, but they still retain those Aquarian qualities because they are still stirring the pot with their parents who are very, I call it like loosey-goosey or bohemian, artistic types of people. It can work both ways, and it can make people like that see the value maybe in some of those habits that someone who is more of a 9-to-5er or a straight-laced person say, that's a really good way to live for this particular reason. And you will see it sometimes in people that do come from families where there is a lot of chaos around them, that they really do kind of do the opposite. But I think that people with this double Aquarius energy have to guard against is being a contrarian, is being somebody who just automatically rejects whatever the status quo is, whatever everybody else is doing. And that's when it becomes a rebel without a cause, because the person is being very reactive. There is, I think there can be a bit of a high-strung energy with this double Aquarius sign combination, because these kinds of people, Uranus rules the nervous system. So there is, you will see Uranian energy expressed like lightning bolts. And some of it is that kind of like bam, instant enlightenment or awakening. But it's also the idea of being very unpredictable. And I was remarking to someone online that Aquarius is a bit of a contrarian in the sense, or an anomaly, that they have this reputation for being very unpredictable, and yet they are a fixed sign, and they can be very predictable. But I think what happens with Aquarius is that they might plod along and be very deeply, I was going to use the term reptilian brained, where they just are deeply entrenched in this pattern, and then all of a sudden they can turn it upside down. And so then it kind of disrupts the pattern. And they may do this for a variety of reasons. They may, because the moon is also in Aquarius, this affects or is informed by your need for safety, for feeling like everything is even like on the emotional fulfillment level, that you're not empty, that you're free, because that's a very big concern about Aquarius, is a sense of freedom, not being emotionally suffocated by anyone else. However, people with the moon in Aquarius can tend to be way too abrupt in how they shut somebody out of their life. They can do this in a very cold way, in a very shocking way. And when you have the sun also in Aquarius, it doesn't help matters. So I would say that a person who's a double Aquarius, I look at it as the King of Swords, that they are so detached that they may be out of touch with their true feelings. And you have to check in with yourself, and even on the conceptual level, because I have an experience with air signs where they tend to be very abstract emotionally, and they're very detailed in their communications about their emotional reactions. So it's all on the mental verbal level. The heart chakra might be shut down, but they still have this awareness of what their feelings are. But they have to come back to the body, because that abstraction only serves to keep them in a place that doesn't allow them to feel, because quite frankly, you may be afraid of feeling. You may feel that feelings could destroy you at any moment. Then, there might be that strong feeling. And so if somebody else is going through something, or maybe you discover when you're dating someone that they're a lot more vulnerable than you thought, and they're a lot more emotionally dependent than you bargained for, that you start to feel like you want to get out of this situation. But because stating those feelings could elicit an emotional, I'm not just even saying like breakdown, but just outcry from that person, it's easier to ghost them. It's easier to just like wash your hands of it. So you may have you may put Casper to shame with how much ghosting you've been doing in your life in some cases, because it's like easier just to move on, to block, to not answer texts. But it's not what I would consider emotional mastery, because that actually involves having emotions to begin with. And everyone has emotions. But when they intellectualize them, not try to understand them on an intellectual level, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that sometimes people try to explain away their emotions in a way that is palatable for them, for themselves, but isn't necessarily the full story, and doesn't really address what is important in a particular relationship. And so it's almost like being too smart for your own good, where you can con yourself based on, justifications and all of those things. The sun in Aquarius is more of to me, the light side, and the moon, the shadow. So the ghosting, in particular, I associate with the moon in Aquarius, regardless of what the sun sign is. It just can be more pronounced when you have this combination, especially since the basic nature of Aquarius in general is to be not really that attached to one-on-one relationships. The 11th house that Aquarius rules is the house of the collective. So that really explains. It's funny. I'm trying to think about Gen Z, because I believe I did I do these generational planets videos that really encompasses a whole generation of people. And I believe Gen Z is Neptune in Aquarius. I'm not sure, but that, I was reading about how young people no longer went on one-on-one dates. They would go with a large group of people. And that's not anything particularly new. That tends to happen in high school. But in this case, I found it interesting because it's possible that there's also this belief that we don't just form emotional attachment to one person, that we can love multiple people, even within the context of a romantic relationship. These are the people who believe in open marriage. And I forgot the other name that they call it, polyamory, that kind of thing. You have to look at your Venus sign to get more information on that, because I feel like a person who has, let's say, their Venus in Taurus will not be keen on, because that's very possessive, will not be keen on having their spouse sleeping with other women. But this combination, especially since the moon is involved, could definitely lead to someone who doesn't have a lot of possessive tendencies. And the good side of this is that there's almost like a spiritual type of an influence in this, because by not treating people like our property, we elevate them and we grant them their freedom, which is highly important and freeing. A lot of people, I think, whether they know it or not, they feel a sense of oppression in relation. And I'm talking about romantic or your life partner, your husband or wife, feel that kind of oppression in such relationships because they feel like they can't do anything without asking permission of their significant other. And yeah, it can feel very uncomfortable, to say the least. It goes without saying that this is a highly intelligent combination. Air signs are known for their intellect and their communication abilities. I feel that Libra and Gemini are more forthcoming verbally than Aquarius sometimes. Aquarius can have a bit of disconnect because it's the mind of an inventor, and they may have a faraway look in their eyes that makes people feel like they're not quite there. And so it is important for this combination to really ground themselves, meaning that they are aware of their body, they're not denying that they have a body, and that they are not high strung, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, where they are way too kind of uptight and anxious, but that they are more deliberate, chill. In addition to being highly intuitive, this combination may be very adept, especially with higher education, like academia, in different areas. I would say that you probably would excel in science and technology. In some cases, depending on what Mercury is and how it's aspected, this person may be neurodivergent. And I'm using this term broadly to also include not just the way that somebody thinks, but the way that they act, where they are being like not intentionally, not trying to prove a point, but just that they do seem different than other people, and they may get treated as eccentric or different. And if this combination is somehow shunned from others, or they are not popular, they do not have, and I'm not talking about, typical popularity, having to be the homecoming queen or anything like that, but just the sense that other people are able to appreciate them socially. If they don't have that, then they can feel very distressed about that because they want to be part of the area regardless. I keep using the word mind, even though, we don't know what Mercury is for each individual. But even with the moon, there can be elements based on what the emotions dictate that deal with your attitudes and almost seem like your thoughts, even though it's your feelings. And so, and creative output. So for instance, the person who is the inventor, that is a Uranian or Aquarian thing. And, the mad scientist, things like that, where the person is really like experimental and trying to see what works. It can be the person who is ahead of their time. But see, when you're ahead of your time, in that time that you happen to be in, people can look at you and think that you're half crazy. And in some ways, you're going to kind of really make a good case for it because you are out of step with other people. That's the strange paradox of the sign of Aquarius. It rules the house, the area of life that has to do with groups, but it often is out of step with them, with the collective. It is very, because of that nonconformity, it doesn't want to be just one of the crowd. And so this can lead to people who automatically reject that side of life. But on the other hand, they may be highly misunderstood, and you have to be willing to accept those things, even if sometimes it may feel maybe it feels lonely, maybe it feels like you're not being vindicated, like you're being misjudged or underrated. There's another term besides underrated. All I can say is like not given enough credit. And I think that there is a sense of not being appreciated for one's gifts that ties into this, because people who do not conform to whatever the norm is are considered rabble rousers, but they're not considered necessarily of a superior intelligence or any of that stuff. People can really look down on those that they say aren't going along with the program. And they can think that those types of people are troublemakers and that they're hurting others with their behavior. So it's really very interesting what kind of perceptions can emerge because of that. But there is that electricity. There can be an aura that comes off of the person that makes them sparkly, that makes them charismatic, even if it's in an odd sort of way, that other people take notice that they're, and it's interesting that the opposite sign of Aquarius is Leo. And Leo, it's, it's very in your face type of being noticed. It's the person that's very extroverted and very over the top and, larger than life, that kind of thing. But with Aquarius, it can be more understated. It can be the person who they really give off this almost like the movie star vibes. And there are a number of actors over the years who were born under the sign of Aquarius. I'm trying to think offhand. Some of the older ones that I'm more familiar with are like Paul Newman, Robert Redford. James Dean is another big one. And as far as like singers, even more contemporary, people like Harry Styles, Justin Timberlake, Ed Sheeran, Shakira, U.S. presidents like Abraham Lincoln, FDR, Ronald Reagan. And, one of the things that can happen, and Michael Jordan is a sports figure that is a legend. One of the things that happens sometimes with these Aquarians is that they do become larger than life, and not necessarily because they're trying to be like their opposite sign Leo, so well known or so beloved, but they really touch upon themes that the average person can relate to. They're very relatable, and so therefore they have it's like being a populist. And I think somebody like Abraham Lincoln really embodied that. And so he transcended, where he was from, what his race was, all of those things to become a people's president. So having both the sun and the moon in Aquarius is really going to enhance that within yourself. And you probably see yourself as someone who is wanting to be, who really identifies with the common man, and that you do not want to be an elitist. You don't want to be somebody who looks down on somebody who isn't like you. That's a big one too, being extremely progressive, or, some people would say liberal. I don't really like the word liberal because it's I think progressive means that you want to see progress and evolution within humanity. It can be the humanitarian, that's what the 11th house represents as well. And so that can inform so many things in your life, including what kind of people you hang around, what you do for a living. You might be more inclined to do things to help others versus just make money. By the way, another person in the music industry, or that a past person that was an Aquarian, was Bob Marley. And I think Bob Marley is one of those people that was elevated to the status of a populist hero, and who really, through his messages in his songs and being a Rastafarian, which we could say is a little bit off the beaten path in terms of religious, choices, and involves cannabis as part of the sacraments. Or, well, I mean, they, I guess I looked it up, but they believe that it's supposed to aid in meditation. And of course, because of the legalization issue, at least in those days, it may have caused controversy. But the point is that he was very alternative, and this is something that we can associate with Aquarians in general, and even mixing the political in with it, and some of the things that he had to deal with political opposition and trying to align with factions that represented the people. So I'm sure that